Greetings all. It's welcome and it's good to see you all here. We would like to thank the city of Wildwood for putting on this forum and particularly for Megan Eldridge for making all the arrangements. My name is Rebecca Now, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Metro St. Louis, and I will be moderating the forum. The other league volunteers who are assisting today, we have as timer, Marcia Clark. And in the back of the room, we have Barbara Harris. And we have Jan Markham. And they will have available index cards if you would like to ask a question. We got very many questions online, so we are pretty well set with questions. But if you have something pressing on your mind, you may give that to Jan or Barbara. If you do need to register to vote or change your address, the league members can assist you. And we would like to thank our candidate forum chairperson for the league, Barbara Harris, for her assistance in planning this forum and many others. These are the rules for the forum that all the candidates have received and by which they've all agreed to abide. The candidates will each have 2 minutes for an opening statement. They will have 1 minute to answer any question. And they will all, of course, have the right to give an answer to any question asked, but in order when it's their turn. They will have a 2 minute each closing statement at the end. They will talk about themselves and not their opponents. So you can talk about yourself and what you believe, think, or feel in answer to a question, but nothing about any of your opponents. It is the candidate's job is to tell what they believe and why they deserve your vote. Your job as an audience is, if you have additional questions, write them on the cards, and then the 2 volunteers will bring them to me, and we will put them into the question orders. We request that you write questions that are of general interest and not about personal matters, issues, and not personalities. In addition, the questions should be legible, and if they're illegible or they're hostile or embarrassing, the moderator has the right to put them aside. We will sometimes group questions when we get multiple questions on the same topic. No campaign materials are allowed in this room. Any buttons, printed materials, even clothing must be out of sight. And there is a table outside the council chambers for that. It is your job as an audience to listen carefully and decide which candidate you are going to support. Responding to a candidate's statement is not allowed. This is not a rally. This is a forum to allow the candidates to present their position on issues which are important to you. And they do that in 1 minute. The timekeeper will time all opening and closing statements, allowing 2 minutes, time all responses to questions, allowing 1 minute. She will indicate 30 seconds remaining with the yellow sign. Then she will put that down and she will indicate the time expired with the red sign. It is my job as moderator to 1, explain the procedure, introduce the candidates, read to the candidates the questions from the audience to be answered, and retain the option to combine questions which are similar or address the same topic. I am also going to ensure that each candidate has an equal opportunity to answer questions and will enforce the ground rules. I ask everyone to turn off their ringers on their cell phones, pagers, watches, any other noise-making devices. The forum will last approximately 1.5 hours, depending on questions asked by you, the audience. And the restrooms are in the, as you probably already know, as you're an involved citizen, in the main lobby behind the staircase. The candidates are in the same order that they will appear on the ballot on election day. In Ward 1, we have Larry Brost. Ward 2, Lauren Edens. Ward 3 is not represented here tonight. She was ill. Ward 4, Katie Dodwell. And in Ward 5, we have Ed Marshall and also Dan Glowski. Ward 6, we have Robert Jaxie. And in Ward 7, appearing via Zoom from the neonatal intensive care unit for his new baby, we hope to connect with Nathan Hopper. Ward 8, we have no representative here. So for opening statements of 2 minutes each, we will start with candidate Brost.
Well, thank you. And thanks to the league for putting on this event. And also we forgot to mention Travis, poor Travis. Another night from home, away from home, but Travis is making sure all the technology works. My wife and I have been in Wildwood for 12 years. We built our home here and never looked back. It's just a beautiful place to be. And with this election coming up, I'll be starting my third term. I believe that the city's gaining some really good traction on the main goals that I had in mind when I started. The most important to me was internet. And I do feel that, we're going to have bumps in the road, but we're certainly making progress. I also believe that the other goals of the city are well defined. And while the council doesn't always agree, I think we have a good working relationship. And I look forward to the next term. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we move on to Ms. Edens, I did want to mention that when we do the closing statements, we will go in reverse order so that Nathan Hopper will be doing the first closing. We'll go the other way. And when we do the questions, we will be starting with Ms. Edens, and we will move down so that's not the same person opening. All right, Ms. Edens.
Turn my microphone on. Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, everyone here in the audience or joining us tonight, because your participation in democracy actually matters. I am your Ward 2 incumbent candidate running unopposed for my third term. My family moved here around 2002 and I went to Lafayette High School, and I'm a Mizzou graduate, and I received my master's of public affairs with a public policy emphasis from them, which still makes me the only person on this council with an education specific to the public sector. And I do love good governance and policy development. That's my joy and passion. As your council member, I have served on administration and public works and watershed erosion currently. I've been a former chair of economic development, a budget chair committee member, a former historic preservation liaison, and served on 2 other ad hoc committees. During this time, I've participated in continuing education. So I've received an UMSL certificate in planning and zoning and economic development and continuing education through the Missouri Municipal League. Growing up here, I really benefited from this community. The good public schools, the safe community, the parks and trails, the events that Wildwood put on that made us feel like neighbors. And I want to make sure that that continues to exist for the next generations. I'm still an independent voice that loves working with my colleagues, and I aspire to always demonstrate cooperation and respect. Please remember to vote April 4th, and you can visit my website, edensforwildwood.com, and feel free to fill out a survey or contact me there. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Dodwell.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you to all of you, the candidates, the people participating in the audience today, and those of you that are on Zoom and working with us through this process. But I especially want to thank the League of Women Voters for the opportunity to have this kind of discourse this evening, to be able to share with you what's important to us as individuals, but also each candidate brings some expertise that I think helps balance that in the city, and we can use that to our advantage going forward. I've lived in Wildwood for 30 years now. I have been on council as the Ward 4 council member for several years. I'm running again because I feel we need to have the city stay focused on three main things: high-speed internet implementation with improved resident communication by both the city and Spectrum, who's providing that service to some of our underserved and unserved areas. Completion of several improvements along Cox Creek by our Watershed Erosion Task Force, and also making sure that we complete the sidewalks in Ward 3/4. We've had residents walking across fields for several decades now. So we want to make sure that's completed. We have a tremendous team of council members, and I look forward to us continuing to get these and many other things completed for our residents as soon as possible. I'd appreciate your vote on April the 4th. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Marshall.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for taking time to join us tonight and hopefully getting to know a little bit more about us. I've had the opportunity to serve the residents of our city for several years. Some might even say too many. I was the first resident appointed to fill an unexpired council member position in November of 1997, shortly after our first charter was approved by the voters. I served as an elected council member for Ward 2 for 8 years, elected mayor of this great city from 2004 to 2008, and in 2009 was elected again to represent the residents of Ward 2 for an additional 8 years, being termed out in April of 2017. My wife and I downsized and relocated to Ward 5 in December of 2017. I'm here tonight because I believe I can add experience to the city council and seeking the opportunity to represent the unique needs of the residents in Ward 5. I've served on all the standing city council committees. I was a council representative of the Planning and Zoning Commission multiple times. And during my tenure, I've been involved in the update process for the master plan, Parks and Recreational Review, Town Center Plan, and served as the committee chair for the 2017 Charter Review Committee. Beginning in 2020-21, I served on the Community Outreach Task Force, assisting in gathering information on over 50 community organizations in the Wildwood area. I'll bring the unique experience of attending probably over 1,000 public meetings and the explanation as to how and why we've grown into the city we are now. We're living in changing times, dictated by guidelines that continue to change, whether they be pushed down from the county, the state, or the federal government, or change based on the needs of our residents. I would really appreciate your vote on April 4th. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Glowski.
Thank you. Glad to be here, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this together. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm not from Missouri. I grew up in Michigan. I first came to St. Louis in 1980 to go to law school at Washington University. And it was early in my legal career that I worked as an associate in the law firm where the city attorney for the city of Brentwood was a partner. And for 4 years, I did municipal law work, gave legal advice to the city and its committees, and became very interested and involved. I also happened to live in Brentwood at the time. And from there, I went to, became appointed to the Board of Adjustment. I served on the Board of Aldermen for 8 years in Ward 3. Following that, I served 12 years on the Planning and Zoning Commission in Brentwood. And over the course of about 25 years of community service to the city of Brentwood, I also served on the TIF Commission, the Tax Increment Financing Commission, the Chapter 353 Redevelopment Corporation, the Manchester Road Improvement Committee, and Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, and a number of other ad hoc committees. and moved to Wildwood about 3 years ago. And by choice, just because I love the area and love the everything that it had to offer. And I'm hoping to put my experience, my education to use for the benefit of the city and the residents of Ward 5 in particular, and would appreciate your vote.
Thank you. Candidate Jaxie.
Good evening, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight. I do appreciate seeing your faces and your involvement certainly in our city government. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this on. My name is Rob Jaxie. I am a sitting council member for Ward 6. This would mark my second full term after this election. I am married to Laura Jaxie for 24 years, and we have 3 adult children, 1 grandchild, and 1 on the way. I retired from the military after 24 years in the Air Force, and I currently teach at University City High School downtown. We've been Wildwood residents for 8 years now. We chose Wildwood, like most military people, because of the school district. During my time in the military, it became abundantly clear to us the most important thing when we made decisions for where we would live would be the school district, and the Rockwood School District was tops in our estimation. That said, we've obviously benefited by the rest of what Wildwood had to offer: the community, the peacefulness, and certainly the neighbors. Running for city council was not on my list of things to do. In fact, it happened as a result of a neighbor approaching me and asking me to do it. Since that time, I have learned a ton, and so happy that I said yes to doing it. My intention is to stay 1 more term and do everything in my power to ensure that everyone in Wildwood has access to high-speed internet. You've heard it from several of the candidates already. It is my top priority. Ward 6 suffers from it at least as much, if not more, than anyone else. So that is one goal that I have that I'd like to see brought to completion by the end of my next term. I've served on multiple committees and hope to serve on additional committees, and would appreciate your vote in April.
Thank you. And Travis, do we have Mr. Hopper? No, we do not. All right, so we will assume that Mr. Hopper, unless we see him pop up there, is not with us. Although we keep him and his family in our good thoughts. All right, now we're going to do the questions, and we will start with candidate Edens, and then each question will roll to a beginning one. So the first question: what are your goals and priorities for your ward and also for the city as a whole?
My ward consistently asks for a few things. The first being rural internet expansion. We're a mixed ward. We have both suburban and more rural type zoning, which makes us particularly unique. We have a tremendous amount of watershed erosion in the Cox Creek watershed that's very concerning. We also need expansion of guardrail and other safety improvements specifically related to sidewalks in the Strecker area. My residents are also very concerned about deer management. So what I would like to do is see a workable solution that is fully funded and implemented over a multi-year process. My concern for the city right now is long-term financial planning and a sustainable revenue source that will allow us to continue to provide the services, quite frankly, that our residents expect, and do so in a manner that buttresses us so that we can put money back towards reserves for a better future. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question, candidate Dodwell.
Thank you. I had mentioned in my opening statements that I had several key issues that I wanted to stay focused on. In my ward in particular, we've had a sidewalk that has been missing along Strecker Road for the 30 years that I have lived out here. I am going to fight very diligently through a variety of issues that the city's been having in getting that completed. We have it budgeted, but it's time to get it completed. want to also make sure that we get Cox Creek fixed as soon as possible. And for all of us, our number one priority is high-speed internet.
Thank you. Candidate Marshall.
Thank you. Ward 5 is a little bit different. There's not a lot of development left, and it's probably the most dense ward that we have in the city. But I still believe that a big challenge for people, just total public safety, making sure that we don't have speeding on the streets, making sure that the parking is somewhat constrained around Lafayette High School. It goes for several blocks where people decide they'll park there and go to class. The water erosion is a big challenge for parts of our ward, and then just community involvement. I'd like to see us try to get more people involved in what we do as a city. For the number of people that we have, people are very busy, but I think we should constantly be focusing on how to get more people involved, and then just providing efficient government for the people to meet the services and the expectations that they have. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Glowski.
Thank you. Couple of priorities for Ward 5 that are priorities for the city as well. One for me would be the reduction of the noise pollution that the residents of Ward 5 in particular hear along highways 100 and 109. And it's not just the normal traffic noise, it's instead drivers with performance vehicles and apparently no mufflers testing the limits of their vehicles, which detracts from the quality of life. The other thing I'd like to see is, and this is important to the residents of Ward 5 just for convenience, but seems to me that the town center is missing a huge opportunity to bring in more services, stores, and other amenities for the benefit of the residents of the city as a whole. And lastly, thank you.
Candidate Jaxie.
Well, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, being from Ward 6, one of the more rural wards, one of the 2 rural wards here in Wildwood, internet is our biggest problem. We have several, well, the bulk of our residents struggle with less than 25 megabyte or even 5 megabyte per second speeds. And that's just not acceptable in today's world. So internet is my top priority for Ward 6. It is the one issue I get phone calls on. Deer management, as mentioned by Councilmember Edens, is definitely another issue that we see in Ward 6. Maybe it's because we're at higher speeds often on many of our roads, but I counted one night on my way home and saw 50 deer between here and my house. So it's definitely something that we have got to get a handle on over the next year. And finally, watershed erosion. It's a problem across the city. While we're focusing right now on the council, most of our efforts in other wards, we know it's coming to Ward 6 at some point.
Thank you. All right, leading off the next round of questions will be candidate. Oh, I'm sorry, Larry Brost.
Everybody's always forgetting me.
Aw.
But there's a sympathy vote there. Yeah, I probably don't have much to add, but Ward 1, certainly internet. And I think now as we're getting into the thick of the project, there's needs to be a real energized focus to make sure that we are actually reaching the residents that need it in a proactive type manner. The public safety behind that, I feel is the priority. We do have, there's been a lot of work and planning toward improvements on Highway 100. We continue to need bridge work. Wild Horse Creek has had a bridge that's required some assistance here recently. Erosion is also an issue for us, the deer management, and you really can't go too far in Ward 1 without someone saying, that they're always concerned about Wildwood being overdeveloped. I'm confident that, out in the Ward 1 area where it is the 3-acre minimum.
Thank you.
It'll be maintained.
Many of you have mentioned deer management in your opening statements and the last question. So someone here in the audience said, do you believe that the newly approved bill making deer feeding illegal is government overreach? Why or why not? And we will start with candidate Dodwell.
That's a good question. Coming with a degree in biology, I'm going to say that feeding the deer is totally against what I believe in, because the animals are here to be able to survive on their own. And we have an overabundance of animals that are in our more heavily populated areas when we have deer feeding going on. They're eating the landscaping components and even the regular trees within the areas that we all live in. And so I think that minimizing that herd will help that population. If you have not looked at the deer in your yard, look at some of them more closely. You will see that they are, in some cases, emaciated. In some cases, they are carrying diseases. And I think we need to do something to minimize their population.
Thank you. Candidate Marshall.
I would kind of weigh in with the same. We have a serious problem. And I truly believe, though, half the people think it's just really nice to see deer in the neighbor's backyard or in their backyard. But I don't think they understand from a public safety standpoint, the millions of dollars in car damage, the amount of money we're spending in landscaping, and just the seriousness of allowing the herd to get that size. And it's a very sick herd. So I don't think we have anything more controversy, because one neighbor would like them gone. The other neighbor would like to feed them. I think the city has a right to stop the feeding only because it has a much bigger position of the deer will not leave to go eat if you're feeding them in your backyard. So I do believe that it's a responsibility to try to correct that under public safety too. I think that's a big issue.
Thank you. Candidate Glaske.
Thank you. I think the question was specifically whether the ordinance prohibiting feeding of the deer population constituted government overreach. And I do not believe that it constitutes overreach, because the city is responsible for the public safety of the city, citizens, traffic, disease, and taking steps to limit the number of deer within the city limits and to discourage them from congregating in the city as well within the purview of the city's authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Jaxie.
So I would agree completely. I do not believe that it's government overreach. We were elected to these positions, or being considered for election to these positions, specifically by our residents to look out for their best interests, to represent their best interests. And one of those is public safety. And the herd as it stands today is a detriment to the public safety. We have got to do something about it. I believe that the no feed ordinance is a piece of that puzzle. It is not the solution. We have a long way to go. But no, I don't believe that it's government overreach.
Thank you. Candidate Brost.
Yeah, I agree with the public safety aspect of it. And, the comment, I wrote it down when you said it, overreach. The other thing I'd really suggest is that get involved in the city, because it's really not so much government overreach as it was government in action. Because there's a lot of people that, residents that took time, and the development of the deer management plan is a combination of a lot of people's effort. And that's in a lot of what we do as a city culminates with input from residents. So in the planning part, whether it's deer management or public safety, it's really good to get involved. And I'd recommend that. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Edens.
Yes, I also agree with every candidate here tonight that this is not an example of government overreach. Look, we tried asking our residents to discontinue this practice and it was not successful. And usually when that happens, we have to step in and educate and teach people why. People that are feeding the deer are doing so for the joy of it. But we didn't come up with this idea on our own. This is recommended by the Missouri Department of Conservation. You may love the deer, you may think you're helping, but a salt lick will spread chronic wasting disease. And we would like that to keep that out of our community. Deer will have digestive tracts in distress from the corn they may be fed. And so there's other concerns for animal lovers in addition to just the risk of Lyme disease increasing, car wrecks, overpopulation in general. So it's not a good practice. We want our residents to know that and discontinue. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, starting off the next round will be candidate Marshall. What is your plan for ward meetings?
Well, I actually think it'd be great if you could have them twice a year. That's how it was originally set up. Unfortunately, if the residents don't show, you kind of just get disappointed and you try to do it once a year. But I think that we do have better ways to communicate now than we did years ago in trying to get everybody into the room. And I think even another opportunity would be to have a ward meeting focused on the trustees for the subdivisions in those wards, to really invite them to come to the meeting because the city's there to help them. And I think that's the easiest way to get the communication to them as well. So I think we should have them.
Thank you. Candidate Glaske.
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Marshall. That's an important part of the process for a couple of reasons. One, to educate the representatives what the concerns are of the people that they represent, but likewise for the residents to get to know their representatives and understand the issues and participate in the process. So I would say, I don't know what the proper interval is between meetings. I would leave that to the representatives to determine based on the issues that are confronting the city and the issues that are being raised or concerns being raised by the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Jaxie.
So in the last 2 years, I've had an opportunity to participate in one town hall meeting. I very much enjoyed it. As candidate Glaske pointed out, it's an opportunity to learn what the residents of my ward are concerned about. If they're not calling me, that's another great way to do it. My last meeting was done via Zoom, thanks to COVID. I'm looking forward to the next one, which I hope will be like this in person. And I suspect annually is probably about the right time period for them. But I can see a time when if there are a large number of phone calls needing to do it more frequently.
Thank you. Candidate Prost.
Yeah, I think the ward meetings are good. In Ward 1, when COVID hit, it sort of went to the back burner. Maybe we didn't give it thought. We did recently have a ward meeting. It was very well attended, which suggests it was something of great interest for our ward. So I do believe that like an annual type meeting is good. But I'm also I'm one to also say is as a city and all the different arms and functions that we have, there's a lot of meetings. And there's also, when you have meetings, if we had 6 or 7 of the city team involved in our meeting, it just puts a burden on people. So we want to manage it. We don't want to have a meeting just for the sake of a meeting. But I felt we had a very good meeting. And I think a frequency of, once a year or less, is fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Edens.
Yes, when I was first elected, there hadn't been a Ward 2 meeting in quite some time. That was one of the first things Council Member Bartoni and myself held here in City Hall. And then we held it again on Zoom during the pandemic. Turnout was not great in our ward. even worse the second year, and it was the same faces. At that time, we had a different city administration and council makeup, and there was debate about even funding the cost of mailers that it would take to let residents know that there was a ward meeting. A real debate about whether or not it was worth it. I would like to hold another ward meeting. I'm not sure that in our ward, we would have successful turnout annually, but it's certainly worth offering. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Dadwell.
In Ward 4, we've had at least one ward meeting per year over the past 5 years, I believe. Even during COVID, we tried to have a ward meeting. Turnout was really pretty low. We have, though, during this whole time period and before COVID, participated in subdivision meetings where we go to that group of residents in a particular subdivision, tell them what's going on in the city, and then hear from them what's important in their particular area. So it's almost like we're making town hall visits to each of the subdivisions that we represent.
Thank you. All right, the next question, we will start with candidate Glaske. And this concerns the evolution of retail in the city. How do you think the evolution of retail should proceed in Wildwood? Recruit to fill what we have, build more, and also, this three-part question, what goods or services would you work to bring to Wildwood? We'll start with you, candidate Glaske.
Interactions with people who are fine and others.
Thank you. Candidate Jaxie.
So when I took over my position on the council, one of the committees I was appointed to was Economic Development Committee. And I can tell you from time on that committee, we have had a slight decline in our occupancy rates for both retail and office spaces around Wildwood. I would very much like to see that trend reverse. It had been going up prior to about 3 years ago. So I would like to see that reverse. We recently hired a new economic development manager, and his robust engagement with business owners locally, I think is setting the right tone. In addition to that, he's seeking out ways to bring new businesses in. The one area that I've received feedback from residents that they'd like to see more of additionally is more restaurants. So whatever Thomas can do and we can do to help him, that I think that would answer some of that need.
Okay, Mr. Broust.
Yeah, whether to fill existing or build more, I think that probably rests more in the business plan of the entity that we're trying to attract. So I'm not gonna, it'd be nice to fill up existing, but the businesses have very unique requirements, and that may drive what they want to do. With respect to what type of services, the restaurants are certainly something that are important. And I think in general, we lend toward more professional services, with dentists, eye doctors, things of that nature that are really important. And I just feel a driving force for developing our retail is in fact the rollout of internet. The Wildwood community has been damaged by not having good internet throughout its city. And the other thing is, I believe as we bring in more residential development,
All right, Miss Edens.
Yes, thank you.
Ms.
So the reality is if a site development plan meets the planning and zoning requirements, it will go through a legal process where it will likely be approved regardless of whether or not there's current vacancies and those continue to remain unfilled. What I would love to see is within those planning and zoning guardrails is that we take advantage of more mixed use space, meaning that we have an opportunity to continue to have commercial development on a bottom or main floor and increase living space on the top floor. And the reason why this is important is because we know that in order to sustain businesses residents want, such as restaurants, we need a higher density crowd living in town center, also known as a lunch crowd, to make those businesses successful. And certainly we do want to support those small locally owned businesses as well through economic development support. And in the future, as we build out, you will see the 30 acres that we own as a city eventually become developed as well. Thank you.
Ms. Dodwell.
To piggyback a little bit on what Councilmember Edens said, or Miss Edens had indicated, we need to fill the existing spaces, but at the same time, we also need to look for additional professional and medical, et cetera, businesses that can be utilizing the existing infrastructure that we have in place. But I don't want to stop them from finding a new way to show off their businesses at all. We need to also provide higher density of those businesses during the lunchtime so that they have the ability to keep restaurants and retail establishments functional throughout the day. Right now, they do not have the kind of business that makes it as profitable as it needs to be for businesses to grow.
Thank you. Mr. Marshall.
I think it's a great question. I think the challenge that we've had for years and years is, in order to have town center thrive, you need to have people who are here during the day. The restaurants, and we've had a lot of great restaurants, they just can't make it on a Friday and Saturday night business. So when we've had office complex move out, we've watched businesses go out of business. So the types of businesses that would possibly take that 40% remote working that we have today and have them come to town center to an office for a couple of days a week would be a great add-on in trying to find those type of businesses. And I think therefore you would also get the restaurant to be able to survive. We have buses now. For years, we didn't have any way to get workers out here. And it's very difficult for somebody to run a restaurant without workers. So it's hard.
Thank you. And that was everyone. We will start the next one with Mr. Jaxie. And the question is, with tax revenue dollars not keeping pace with inflation and increased expenses, and with the phasing out of the utility franchise fee and the mayor and city council lowering the utility tax rate recently, how do you propose paying for services that residents expect and need in the future? Mr. Jackson.
Wow. Give me the hard one. So look, the situation is we have a balanced budget and we value having that balanced budget in the city. And we've done a very good job of it historically, and certainly over the last couple of years. It has been a concern since I got on to the council. It's been a concern of the council from day one. The bulk of our taxes come from the pool tax and not something that we have as much impact on as we would like. It's not an easy nut to crack. I think we're balancing the budget right now. And frankly, I'm not sure what we can do to increase revenues. We've been streamlining services as much as we possibly can, and we run a very low overhead in the city, unlike many. So I'm hopeful that we can continue to do that, but I'm always open to additional ideas.
Thank you. Mr. Brost.
Yeah, I overall, I have a concern if I look at the city and that we're a relatively young city that's, I'll say, well capitalized and well managed. But as we go from being roughly a 25-year-old city to a 50 or 100-year-old city, I think we're going to experience new avenues of concern. As a city, Wildwood has never imposed a real estate tax. We've avoided, legislation on the Wayfair tax. The recent decrease is about 25,000 to the city. But I think it's a longer term concern that it's not near term, and because the revenues for the city are somewhat inflation adjusted through the sales taxes. So that's a big point that keeps us in line without an increase. So but those are my main comments on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Edens.
Okay, so here's the situation. We get our money three ways: courts, fines and fees, utility taxes, and sales tax. Our sales tax dollars are roughly staying the same, meaning that when you add inflation, that buying power per dollar gets you less far. We have since are in the process of phasing out a utility franchise fee. And in addition, this council voted to decrease the percent that we're collecting on the gas tax. So the reality is we're doing more and more and more with less money, while continuing to expand our city and do things like adopt new roads. So our costs are going to increase and our responsibilities are going to increase. And to me, the obvious solution is to pass the internet use sales tax. It's not fair to local businesses that you can buy a good here and have it taxed by a municipality, but not pay any municipal tax when you order from Amazon or order from Target online. It's unfair, and this is, to me, the logical solution before we look at any other type of tax. And we can do that here as a council by placing it on the ballot. Thanks.
Ms. Dadwell.
Thank you. I tend to concur with what everybody else has said up to this point. However, our budget has been balanced for decades now. We've had to put some parks projects out to future years because we're looking at how do we make sure that our current services that we're providing as a city continue to function, such as our police, our roads and bridges, etc. We tax through our retail pool sales tax. Those will rise as the cost of goods rise, but I also believe that we need to look at internet purchase taxing and perhaps an additional tax to help support the majority of activities that our residents do in our parks and our open spaces.
Mr. Marshall.
Great, thank you. It is a challenge. And again, it's where other people are taking our revenues away from us. I think for years we've talked about having, and there's the possibility of putting a tax on that would allow us to develop parks and water erosion type issues. Having that, a 0.5 cent tax would create enough money that would allow you to do long-term bonding and things like that. And we kept saying we never wanted to go after park tax because people just really didn't see the parks. We go down the trails now, they're using the trails. And so I think we have to really communicate that this would be another alternative because it is expensive. As they get older, the grants are great. We've done very well in getting the grants, but the maintenance is not a grant. That becomes long-term obligation. So I think that's one of the ways. I think there's just a challenge. We have to look at how can we do it best. And, we're spending a lot of money on different projects. So just be more efficient.
Thank you. Mr. Glowski.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the questioner and the question itself implies that some city services and amenities are not being provided or may not be provided in the future because of cutting taxes or not imposing taxes. And to my knowledge, there has been no shortfall in services provided or amenities provided by the city. And if I was ever to become aware that the citizens were not being served because of lack of money, we would certainly look at other sources of revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that completes that one. And starting with Mr. Broust on this one, this should be a very quick one. Have you financially contributed to Mayor Boland's Missouri Senate campaign?
Oh, I think I'd like to ask a lawyer if I have to answer that one. I think I'm in trouble either way. I'll answer it, but the answer is no.
Okay. Candidate Edens.
No, nor have I been asked to.
Okay. Ms. Dodwell.
No,
Okay. Mr. Marshall,
No,
Mr. Glowski,
Yes.
and Mr. Jaxie.
No.
Okay. Very good. All right, next up would be Ms. Edens to start the round. And this question is, how do you explain city council meetings going to once a month and justify that to residents seeking to needing to process or approve zoning requests or having private contracts with substantial financial impact and or public hearings that must have approvals with first and second readings? How do you justify that wait of up to 5 weeks for all of these issues?
Wow, that is a heavy one. In short, I can't justify it. I didn't support the move to go down to 2 council meetings. At the same time that happened, planning and zoning went down to once a month as well. So what happens is if you have to go back and work with a department and answer more questions or do more research, you are pushing a process off for another month at a time at a minimum. And while you can say, yes, we're still moving through bills, we are doing that in what I feel is a rushed fashion by pushing all of the second readings into one night. And it gives citizens less of an opportunity to comment or be involved, because now you only have one meeting where you have to be available at that time to speak in person and represent yourself, as opposed to double the opportunities at least another committee and our own.
Candidate Dodwell, Ms. Dodwell.
I don't really have a full explanation other than a vote went before council and I voted against having a single council meeting. I do not necessarily agree that that is the most effective way to communicate with our citizenry and or to complete the tasks that need to get done. So that's where I'm at on that one.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Marshall.
oh yeah, I didn't get to vote on it, but I totally oppose it. I think that we deserve to have the citizens know that twice a month they can come in and speak to the council. And I think the council would do better if they had the opportunity to hear what people had to say about those issues. I get it that it's convenient, but I just don't think that's why we're here. We're here to listen to the people. And when we would do 2 hearings or we do 2 readings, many times there'd be a change that was to make it better. And when you read things twice and nobody has a chance to adjust it, I don't think we're doing our duty the best way, but I had no vote. So
Thank you.
come once a month.
Mr. Glowski.
Thank you. Yeah, likewise, I was not involved in that decision. I just know from my personal experience, my prior experience with the city of Brentwood, 2 meetings a month was the standard. And even with 2 meetings a month, sometimes we would need to have special sessions or expedite matters. And I think that's important for some entities or people with business before the board. I would have to take a look at the reasoning behind the 1 meeting a month decision and look at the problems associated with that and come to a decision as to whether that's needed in the city of Wildwood. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jaxie.
So as I recall, that started out during certain times during the year, like Christmas time, et cetera. We reduced to 1 meeting during the month of December, and that made a lot of sense to me. There's been a push over the last several months to move to this 1 meeting concept, and I'm not a fan of it at all. So I can't justify it. I actually would prefer that we go back to 2 meetings per month. I believe it gives, as Mr. Marshall said, us an opportunity to really perfect the language of some of the things that we have coming before us at any given moment. So I'd be a fan. I am a fan of going back to 2.
Thank you. Mr. Brest.
I'm probably on the fence with it, and I honestly would go, with the residents on this. I'm fine with one meeting or two meetings. Yeah, I'm not aware of like any issues that we've had. I don't know if there's been any public speaking against the current format. I'm not aware of anything on P and Z that I'm a member of that's been an issue, so. But the 100%, if there's issues out there, it would be critical that we'd go back to two meetings a month. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next meeting, or the next question, excuse me, has to deal with sewer line insurance. And this questioner, which comes from the live audience, is in favor of this and says, is there any chance to get sewer line insurance citywide as part of our real estate taxes? And we will call on Ms. Dodwell to answer this one. Start.
We've had discussions on this issue. Some have been behind closed doors because it's not public information yet. Some have been in front of the public. There are pros and cons to this, and at this point, I think it would be helpful if we had information available for residents. I know my homeowner's insurance would cover what comes from the street into my property, rather than have the city pay for that lateral line replacement. That's where your sewer lateral lines is between the roadway and your house.
Thank you. Mr. Marshall.
Yeah, actually, we put it on the ballot a few years ago. The challenge that the city has is the way the regulations read. It's up to MSD to identify who has sewer line laterals. Half the city doesn't have MSD. So those people were voting. They did not want to pay a tax or an upgrade for their sewer line systems to their septic tanks. So the communication was a real challenge. Now, if that's been changed, I know individuals can buy through the utility company. It's very expensive, but I truly believe that the communication and trying to get some adjustment as to if you don't have MSD, you shouldn't be voting on that issue, which would be a real challenge to try to break up the voters. But I think that would be a way to work around it, because those of us that live in homes that are getting older, you see a lot of sewer line laterals being replaced, and those are $12,000 to $15,000 a throw. So I think there's a way to work around it. It's a tough one. Thank you.
Mr. Glassky.
Thank you. I know the city of Brentwood considered this, and I would vote in favor of it. It was implemented a sewer lateral line tax, and it made sense in Brentwood just because of the aging housing stock, much older, I think, than most of the housing in Wildwood. So I would have to take a look at the, as Mr. Marshall pointed out, the number of residents that would benefit from it and the number of residents who could expect to see some type of sewer lateral line failure. Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
So the council has talked about this several times in the last couple of months. I am in favor of trying to make it happen, some sort of a tax to deal with the lateral sewer line. That, as Mr. Marshall points out, the issue is, for instance, Ward 6. We don't have very many people that actually have sewer in Ward 6. The bulk of us aren't. So how do we navigate that issue of many of the residents of both Ward 1 and Ward 6 don't have to deal with the issue, but it isn't a problem as homes are aging. And from my discussion with the other ward council members, they're starting to really hear it from their constituents quite a bit. So definitely a problem in the future, and one that I think we should address.
Thank you. Mr. Brost.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's something that needs, to be looked at. And one of the things that we have in our city, because of, we're 65 square miles, and there's such a variety of homes. Like I live on acreage. I have my own septic in Ward 1. A lot of Ward 1 does. But we're going to find that like we have situations where the top priority in a ward is a sidewalk. We don't have any sidewalks, but we all need to support each other. We have this project going on right now that's benefiting Ward 1 and Ward 6 greatly called Internet. Well, you know what? We all need to work together, and I think it's just one of these that each and every decision may not have equity for all, but we all need to work together and assess what's the best decision for those residents. Because I appreciate everybody's support on Internet.
Thank you. Ms. Edens.
Excellent comments so far. I will add to the discussion as well and tell you where we left off as a city, but I do support sewer lateral extension insurance as a ballot initiative. We brought this up in administration and public works. This conversation occurred many months ago, and certainly everyone was in favor of it. We had a rather large memo produced that was research-based about what other communities were doing. So for example, if we propose this program, are we going to pay a % of the total costs? Are we going to cap it at a certain dollar amount? Are we going to cover 100% of the costs? What is the procedure for reimbursement? For example, a lot of cities require 3 bids to be presented by a homeowner. So we got into a sort of a nitty gritty discussion because we would have to budget for this program. And then we got sort of rather busy with other things as a committee. It is back up on the agenda for a future meeting, and I look forward to that discussion if I'm still on that committee. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, the next question. How do you feel about the progress of the high-speed internet? And what do you say to Wildwood residents that were excluded but told they would be included in phase 1? And we will start this with Mr. Marshall.
It's a big job. It's a big challenge. And I think as continue to progress, everybody that they can get into it is great, but it's just not 1 in 6. There's other parts of the city where we have very large groups of people that have not been able to get internet for the last 20 years. So I think the more they can get accomplished, the more Spectrum can get the people up and running, the better it's going to be. And I don't think there's any other company out there that can do as much as Spectrum can do, but it's still a lot of money. And I think that'll continue to be a challenge for the next probably 4 to 5 years of trying to add on to what the initial plan was originally. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Glasky?
Thank you. I was not involved in that decision as to which areas of the city would receive priority for implementation of the high-speed internet. And I've not been I'm not aware of the speed or progress or lack thereof with the project. So I think I'll reserve my comments until after I have better familiarity. Thank you.
Mr. Jaxie.
So I suspect, like most of the council members, I'm very disappointed with the progress to date on the rollout. In December of 21, when this came before the council and I pushed hard for a second reading that evening, I will tell you, I was very disappointed that it wasn't all inclusive of everyone beyond wards 1 and ward 6 as well. But I couldn't in good conscience kick that can down as long as I've lived here, and much longer than that. The current contract as written should bring high-speed internet to roughly 8,000 residents. That's a quarter of the population of the city. So I voted in favor of pushing it. I am a fervent supporter of getting it to all residents before I leave, and have heavily pushed to get phase 2 started as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Mr. Brost?
Yeah, I guess, part of me is that I live with this burden that says we can always do better. So, and that's how I view when I approach something, is that when I go back and I look at it, I always take that approach. What would I do better? With the internet, a project like this, is really very difficult for everybody. But I do believe the city could have done better in defining the target to receive internet. And I would say is that as the project's rolling out, in order like to get it rolling, which I agree, we had to get this thing going. It's now the time, as we get deep into the weeds, to really make sure that we knowingly include or exclude any resident from internet. And the other thing that is very important is that
Thank you.
internet.
Ms. Edens.
How do I feel about the rural internet expansion progress? I am angry, quite frankly. I love my colleagues, but I tell you, there's probably claw marks on the ceiling from me during meetings, and Councilmember Bartoni and I have nearly pulled our hair out. Our residents in Ward 2 were excluded, even with documented issues. I have residents on hotspots on their cell phone and other residents averaging 12 megabits per second upload download speed. They certainly qualified for federal dollars. This contract could have done much better, but they were told to specifically look at wards 1 and 6 only, and we were outvoted. And I have had residents look me in the face and say, I was promised internet. Why was I lied to? Why was I lied to? And that is heartbreaking. And I want to do better. They deserve better. Thanks.
Ms. Dodwell.
A little difficult to add on to what you've already heard. I have residents in Ward 4, one of the more populated areas within the city of Wildwood, that do not have internet access. I am hopeful that the city council, along with our current provider of services that we've contracted with, Spectrum, will be willing to look again at who is covered and who is not covered, and we can come up with an updated plan, procedure, and way to ensure that all of our residents have internet access within the city of Wildwood.
Thank you. All right, we got several questions, and this one will go to Mr. Glowski to begin about the charter, the ballot proposition 1 about the charter amendment. We got several questions. Why was this necessary? It's been 2 years in a row, and there is a charter review committee process in place. Was this necessary? Mr. Glowski.
City council practice in the corporate environment where you don't have the board of directors. Current decisions that I think that it would make it much easier to manage the city and the city administrator, acting president or CEO, fire and others board.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson.
So I believe the question specifically asked, was it necessary? And I do not believe it was necessary. The charter was written the way it was. It's reviewed every 10 years. And I believe that if that had been a recommendation 8 years ago during the last review, then that would have been the time to make the change. It's coming up for another review in a couple of years, and that would be the time to look at it. I don't believe it's necessary. I've had many positions where I've had 2 bosses. And in this particular case, Wildwood was set up in a manner that it's a very small city government, and it's managed by the people that sit on this dais. And I'm comfortable that the 3 most important positions in the city, the 2 directorships and the city administrator, should rest the hiring and firing decisions for them should rest with the council.
Thank you. Mr. Prost.
Yeah, I think the question, was it necessary? I don't think it was necessary, but I do believe that I think it aligns better with the regular corporate structure, which is, the life I'm more used to. But no, I don't think it was necessary to have it there at that time. It could have, waited for the regular review, but I do agree with the approach on it.
Ms. Edens.
Thank you. Yes, no, I do not believe it was necessary. I did not support it either in committee or on this council for the final vote. At the end of the day, while we take lessons from the private sector, we're not set up the same way. We have certain protections in place for bureaucrats serving because we are a government. And I truly don't believe that this has ever affected our efficiency as a council or as an organization. We had a check and balance in place where this council had the ability to either rubber stamp a recommendation or disagree with that. And I am certainly glad of our ability to do so and would hope that the voters would see the value in that as well.
Thank you. Ms. Dodwell.
I think this provides an opportunity to allow the council to manage the city administrator by providing a means for the city administrator to work towards more of a corporate style of management. While several individuals up here have indicated that this prop will allow the city administrator to hire and fire, he would have to bring that recommendation back to council before he made that final decision. He cannot do that without input from the board that he works for. So I am not against this at this time because it does align a little bit better with corporate structure.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
Yeah, I think it's a big mistake. Primarily, the charter was set up to be reviewed by residents throughout the city, people who are not involved in running the city. And every line, and I've done 2 of the charter reviews, every line of that is read by everybody and talked about as to what does this mean and how do we go about doing it. Not only did we change it without going through the citizens' input in a charter review commission, which you could do that. I mean, you don't have to wait 10 years, up to 10. But we didn't do that. But then we read it twice in one night to put it on the ballot, which to me is just a slap in the face of the residents. I don't believe we've had, I've been involved with 6 or 7 city administrators and the senior staff. I think we have a total of 3. So it's just kind of out of balance, in my opinion. The council still has a responsibility, and whether it helps the city administrator, I don't see it really changing it, but I do believe it's not necessary.
Okay. All right. We will do one last question and then we will go to the final question and the closing. And we will start with Mr. Jaxie. Do I have that right? Okay. Will you support the new proposed Greenberg development located between the theater and Taylor?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Prost.
Well, I'm going to try to outdo you by saying yes.
Ms. Edens.
I do plan on supporting it. However, we're still waiting on the final document from planning and zoning before council. I do read everything first. We do have a public hearing process where I will take into consideration any comments. But as far as I can tell, it does meet the criteria, and that is why planning and zoning approved it.
Ms. Dodwell.
As soon as I see the details from planning and zoning, I will most likely vote yes for approving it.
Mr. Marshall.
I actually thought it was approved last month.
Okay.
So it'll be up to the current council and the planning and zoning, but it has made all the steps and obviously it wouldn't have gotten this far if it's not going to be supported. So
you would support it?
yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure I have
Thank
a say
you.
in it.
Mr. Glasgow.
Thank you. I'm not familiar enough with the specifics of the project to say whether I would support it or not. If I was in a position to vote on it, I would have to look at the details, the history, and come to my own independent determination about whether it's a viable project and would benefit the city.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to tell you the final question, and then I have some announcements to make about the league, et cetera. So you will have time to think about this for the final question. And then following that, we'll have your 2-minute close. So, and we will start with Mr. Brost when we do this. A few things to tell you. There's a brochure at the back table outlining the mission of the League of Women Voters. We encourage informed and active participation in government, influencing public policy through education and advocacy. We never support or oppose any political party or candidate. All of the League members here are volunteers, and the League is a nonprofit organization to provide the services such as this candidate forum, speakers bureau presentations, a help call-in line, and website for voters, as well as the voter's guide for elections. It takes many, many volunteer hours and a sizable monetary outlay. We welcome contributions, all of which are tax deductible, so that we may continue these services to the St. Louis community. You may contribute on our website, which is www.LWVSTL, League of Women Voters, STL. If you are interested in joining the League, membership information is available on the table outside or online, and you may visit our Facebook page. Membership in the League is open to men and women, all men and women, ages 16 and above. Membership dues and contributions are tax deductible. So for closing remarks, part of which they would like to hear is, what is your vision for the city of Wildwood 20 years from now? What do you envision as far as retail, residential, economic development would be that? So we will begin that, but I wanted to thank the city of Wildwood and specifically Megan Eldridge and Travis for what you have provided tonight for organizing and hosting. And I'm sorry, we are going to go in reverse order. I misspoke, Mr. Roast, and we will start the opposite way for reverse order. And I want to thank you for an excellent forum here. So, Mr. Jaxie, you get to do closing 2 minutes.
Well, thanks again for putting this on. One of the things I wanted to share was, I think I mentioned in my opening remarks, that public service was not something on my to-do list. That said, in the last 24 months, I have worked with some incredible people. Both people that sit on this bench, as well as the citizens of Wildwood. What I would like to do is encourage the citizenry to get involved even more, right? Put yourself out there and take an opportunity to influence the government that helps to serve you and provide you with the various things. You've heard the issues this evening, some of the issues that we deal with, right? Internet, huge for Ward 1 and 6, public safety, development. These are all issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I can tell you that it's been a wonderful experience to this point. And I want to encourage others to do it, because I think in 20 years, Wildwood will be exactly what you want it to be based on the people that you put up here, right? The people that you put into office. Hopefully you're educating yourself or taking a role, playing a role yourself to help influence Wildwood to be exactly what you as a resident want it to be. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Glasgow.
Thank you. I would hope that in 20 years, Wildwood would be in the state where the most attractive feature of Wildwood, as I know it today, has been preserved, and that is the natural beauty. I think it's unrealistic to think that the undeveloped property in the city is not going to be developed and is going to somehow become all nature preserves or parks. But that's not going to happen. And I think it's important to maintain that feature of Wildwood, that any development that is approved, that we're fortunate enough to attract, it includes very stringent requirements for maintaining current natural aspects of the property and enhancing it if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marshall.
Yeah, I would hope that in the next 15 to 20 years that we start to see some of the things that we've been working on for such a long time. You know, the community college is going to be putting a new addition on. There's enough room there for another addition on top of that. The traffic hopefully can handle those type of things. And as we see the development with more people in the town center area, that's where we really need to develop it and maintain in the suburban areas that lifestyle that people have moved here for, but yet have the conveniences and things in the town center. I'd just like to thank the League of Women Voters for holding this event tonight. And again, my reason to serving on the city council is to promote efficient local government and to represent the needs of Ward 5 as they relate to the progress of the whole city. And I just really believe that working together, we can see effective development of residential and commercial without doing damage to the environment and continue to provide those services to the residents that they've been accustomed to. And as they continue to raise that bar, we should be able to meet those expectations. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dadwell.
I'm very, very proud to be a citizen of this community. I think it's a community like no other in the state of Missouri. The maintenance of the parks that we've been able to provide, the land use guidelines and structure that we've put in place. I'm very, very hopeful that in the next 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now, we still have all of the features that all of us came here for. The outdoors, places to play, places to be with friends. I think we've got a vibrant town center already. I want us to see us expand on that so that these businesses can continue to operate. We can have a daytime environment that's just as robust as the evening environment for our retail and restaurant businesses. And then I want us to continue to have the amazing fiscal responsibility that we've had. Several of you brought up questions on taxes and how are we going to do what we do. For those of you who may not know, our city finance department has won awards across the nation for years and years and years for the fiscal responsibility and the way that we as both council, mayor, city staff, and that department have handled the tax dollars and all of the funds that have been provided by you, the citizens. My ultimate hope and goal is that everybody remains as happy and as vibrant as they are today, and that this is a growing city in not how many retail spaces and how many businesses we can have, but in how many happy citizens we can have each and every day.
Thank you. Ms. Edens.
Yes, I would love to see this community in the next 20 years continue to be built out according to the master plan, where our rural needs and our suburban needs are balanced. And at the end of the day, it's not the road maintenance and the bridges that people remember, it's community engagement, community involvement. What makes you feel different than living in an unincorporated area? I've gotten to work on some projects like Winterfest, a tourism campaign, a veterans business program, and a rescheduled lawn and garden summit. But I'm not done with some new ideas. I've gotten to work with the Wildwood Business Association, the Missouri Municipal League, and the West St. Louis Chamber of Commerce, because engaging other associations in the community and working with intergovernmental organizations is very important for how we conduct our business. I have advocated for public safety measures like traffic control, guardrails, street signs, and road improvements, and watershed erosion. But I'm not done because I need to continue to advocate for Ward 2's inclusion and high-speed internet access and continue to work towards a manageable deer solution. I would love to remind you to vote again April 4th. You can visit my website, edensforwildwood.com. And our city motto is planning for tomorrow today. And my goal is to continue to do that with healthy governmental planning. And I would encourage all of you to think about how you can get involved in your community. So whether that's volunteering for a nonprofit, such as the League of Women Voters in your community, or joining us on a committee, or even running for office, we are only as good as the people involved and the ideas that are brought to the table. So it matters if you have a skill set to contribute. Thanks, and don't forget to vote.
Thank you. And last but not least, Mr. Prost.
Well, I'm pretty confident Lauren's going to see the city 20 years from now, and I hope I do too. But I think I think the current development activities and the focus of the city, I think 20 years out, we're going to see a more defined community. And there's several things that I think are going to be really supporting that, is that we're seeing over the last few years with COVID, and something that's going to continue, but there's a work shift. And with people being able to work remotely, why not try to work in the environment that we have here to offer in Wildwood? I think that's going to be a significant asset for our city. And then, in addition to a community, places where people can work, and I'm thinking a lot of people working from home. The other thing that's critical for our community, and it's also great, is that we have a great school district, we have great healthcare, and when you put that together, I think we're going to be a desired community in the St. Louis area for a long time. And I think we're moving in a great direction. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for a wonderful forum. Thank you, Travis, one more time. And from the League of Women Voters of Metro St. Louis, thank you all for coming. And remember, make democracy work.